On Sunday morning's departure, Claire carried 2 bags, her work slung over her shoulder, and gave me a hasty goodbye kiss at the door. A corporate off-site seminar, she explained, lasting 3 days somewhere upstate. I didn't inquire about the precise location. During the past year, there had been 5 or 6 trips like this. As an SVP at a Manhattan firm, such a schedule was customary. I had ceased requesting details some time ago. On Tuesday mornings, I sat at my desk scrutinizing client files when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number from the Manhattan area code. A young woman identified herself as Claire's assistant. She possessed urgent documents requiring my signature, but Claire was unreachable. Her phone was directly rerouting to voicemail. I concurred with her explanation. Claire was presumably attending a company offsite and likely had her phone switched off to avoid disturbing the sessions. However, there was an extended silence on the line before the assistant spoke cautiously. "Mr. Harwick, we don't have any seminars scheduled this week." Claire requested personal days off instead. I maintained a steady tone. I informed her I would investigate and thanked her before ending the call. For a brief moment, I was motionless. Claire had mentioned it as a corporate event, yet her company classified it as personal days. This wasn't an error in scheduling. One doesn't accidentally request personal time off for a firm-mandated offsite. Distinct requests they are. So I phoned her back. After 4 rings, voicemail picked up. I traversed to the kitchen and retrieved her tablet from the counter where she usually left it charging. For years, we've shared an account with full access. Opening the browser, I scrutinized the history. Typical sites like news outlets, work emails, shopping links were there, but recurring over the past 6 weeks. A single name surfaced frequently. Wildflower Farms, Albert's Resorts Collection, navigation instructions from Greenwich, restaurant menus, room availability in late March, then again in April. Located approximately 2 hours from home in Gardner, New York, resided Wildflower Farms. After setting the tablet aside, I waited, then phoned again after a couple of hours. This time she responded, sounding cheerful but hurried. She confirmed the event was proceeding smoothly, though it was a bustling day, leaving little room for conversation. Understanding her predicament, I reassured her it was fine. Subsequently, I inquired about the venue, almost as an aside. After a short pause, she mentioned vaguely it was upstate, admitting she wasn't sure of the precise location. "Rick," she said, clearly not available to chat more. "Everything's okay, don't worry, I'll message you tonight." The call ended. I looked at Find My on my phone. Claire's dot was stationary on the map. I zoomed in closer. Gardner, New York was revealed. For a moment, I stared at the screen, then slipped the phone into my pocket and retrieved my keys. Convinced it was simple, a 4-hour round trip. If there was a seminar, I'd stroll in, catch her off guard, and locate a restaurant together for dinner. For weeks, she'd likely poke fun at me about it. If not, I'd know. Either way, I wasn't going to spend time in Greenwich playing guessing games. I climbed into the car and headed northward. The journey to Gardner takes approximately 2 hours from Greenwich. I had ample time to ponder. I began to mull over the past year in my mind. The excursions had commenced about 14 months ago. The initial one was in January, a 2-day conference in Boston she'd mentioned. Then March, then twice during the summer, then fall. Each occasion mirrored the same routine. Prepared the night prior, departed early, returned by Thursday or Friday. Every instance offered a plausible explanation. A client meeting, a leadership retreat, a quarterly review offsite. I'd never doubted any of it. She was an SVP. Such travel was expected. However, her assistant had specified personal days for this week. This implied either someone at work was standing in for her or no one knew her actual location. Regardless of the outcome, some of those previous journeys turned out to be fabrications. My thoughts drifted back to the tablet. The name Wildflower Farms frequently appeared in her browsing history over a span of 6 weeks, which wasn't mere curiosity. One doesn't casually search for an upscale resort that often unless it's a planned visit or a return trip. A photograph then struck me. A few weeks back, I had briefly checked the weather on her tablet, and an album labeled Memories appeared on the screen, containing pictures from the previous year. I had glanced over it without a second thought. However, one picture had left an impression on my mind, even if I wasn't aware of it at the time. It was a corporate event image featuring Claret, standing close to an unfamiliar man. His arm was around her shoulders, and they were both laughing. At that moment, I hadn't given it much thought. Now it was all I could think about. I continued driving northwards. Wildflower Farms is situated on a hilltop overlooking the Hudson Valley. Constructed buildings from stone, wooden pathways leading towards the water and gardens descending towards it. At precisely 5 o'clock, I parked my vehicle. The primary eatery boasted an open-air terrace offering a panoramic view. I ambled towards it gradually, maintaining a distance close to the tree line. Before taking 20 steps, she was visible. She was seated at the end of the terrace, a glass of wine in her proximity. Beside her was a man I had never encountered before, tall and approaching his 60s, adorned in a dark coat. As I observed, he spoke to her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She chuckled slightly and moved closer to him, both gazing at the valley below. I extracted my phone and captured several distinct images. Subsequently, I retraced my steps and returned to the car. I seated myself in the driver's position and unfolded the tablet I had brought with me. I retrieved the memories album, unearthing an old photo from a corporate event where that same man stood closely beside her, with an arm around her, both images crystal clear. I positioned my phone alongside my tablet for comparison, verifying they were indeed the same person. Both devices were discarded onto the passenger seat. I browsed for licensed private investigators in the Hudson Valley region and found a highly rated one. After calling them, I outlined my needs plainly: 2 individuals at this particular location, with as many time-stamped photos as possible over the following days. He agreed to commence that very evening. I restarted the car and returned to Greenwich. In 2 days, an email arrived from the investigator containing 20 photographs, all time-stamped and geotagged, showing Claire and the man checking in at the front desk, dining together, strolling the grounds, and departing in his vehicle. The detective also added a note with a name: Everett Hale, aged 52, a partner at a prominent Manhattan law firm. I browsed their website and found his profile listed. His expertise is in corporate litigation. He's been with the company for 20 years, boasting an impressive clientele. The man on the terrace bore an exact likeness to Hale's photo. Further reading revealed an intriguing fact. Hale's wife was the daughter of the firm's founding senior partner. Over 3 decades, he had built this empire and still held its reins. In New York's legal sphere, this relationship wasn't merely personal, it was a cornerstone. Hale's entire standing within the firm, his client ties, and his prestigious status all hinged on that link. Without it, he would be indistinguishable among other litigators seeking employment. I pondered over this for a while before opening my laptop to search for upcoming events linked to the firm. The senior partner was hosting an annual client conference at a midtown hotel the following week. The gathering was accessible to corporate patrons and potential associates, offering online registration as an option. I retrieved my consulting firm's details, completed the registration form, and paid the required fee. Thus, I had a legitimate reason to be within that space, with no room for doubt. The only remaining task was determining the contents of the folder. The following morning, I printed all 20 photos. They were clear prints, full-sized, with the timestamps clearly visible on each one. I organized them sequentially, placed them inside a neutral manila envelope, and sealed it. My preparations ended there. There was little else to accomplish. For days, I had been mulling over this situation, considering it from various perspectives. Claire's employment agreement forbade personal interactions with partners from opposing firms. I recalled reading that provision when she signed it 4 years ago. That formed one part of the puzzle. However, Hale was the more susceptible point of leverage. At the conference, his career hinged on the longevity of his marriage, since it was his father-in-law who was hosting. A single letter could bring about the collapse of his whole career. No calls or emails were to be made. He planned to hand-deliver it personally. Straightforward and discreet. The conference day was Thursday. He dressed in a suit, collected the envelope from his desk, and drove into the city. Midtown bustled as usual, with taxis, construction, and hurried individuals with downcast gazes. He parked 2 blocks away from the hotel and walked over. At the registration desk, they confirmed his name and gave him a badge before directing him to the main ballroom on the 3rd floor. With envelope concealed under his arm and badge in hand, he took the elevator up, knowing full well the outcome that awaited. He chose to proceed regardless. In the meeting hall, round tables accommodated approximately 150 individuals. The walls were adorned with coffee stations, buzzing with hushed conversations, a space where everyone was acquainted. I secured a beverage and located a spot by the side for an unobstructed view of the stage. At exactly 9, Gerald Whitmore ascended to the podium. At 70 years old, he was a distinguished gentleman whose presence had dominated every room he entered over the years. He extended greetings to the attendees, discussed the firm's achievements, and delineated the upcoming year's plans for their practice areas. His speech was carefully modulated, suitable for large gatherings. After descending from the podium, a group congregated near him promptly. I bided my time. Once done with my coffee, I observed the crowd. Over the course of approximately 15 minutes, the gathering dissipated. A peer conversed with him briefly before departing. Whitmore stood isolated, surveying the room as a host does when he believes the challenging part is concluded. Approaching him, I introduced myself. "I'm Rick Harwick from Harwick Consulting in Greenwich." He greeted me with a polished handshake and smile. Placing the envelope on the table beside his coffee cup, I said, "You might find this intriguing." He opened it, examined a few photos, then froze. He scrutinized the first photograph for an extended period before neatly organizing the stack, returning them to the envelope and tucking it away. Remaining silent, he offered no response. "I felt it was only fair to inform you in case this issue falls on someone else," I explained, departing shortly thereafter. Upon my return to Greenwich, it was past noon. My home arrived around 2 o'clock, with Claire's car parked in the driveway and the living room light illuminated. Sitting on the couch, she held her phone, looking up at me the instant I entered. Immediately, I noticed something had transpired amiss. Her visage was taut, restrained, yet on the verge of shattering. She disclosed Everett had blocked her across all platforms that morning, simultaneously on every number. Later, her law firm's legal advisor received a missive from their lawyer. In it, Hale characterized her as persistently harassing him in an unprofessional manner, his strategy to preempt the narrative and portray himself as the wronged party. She locked eyes with me. "Rick," she queried, "what did you do?" I opted for candor. I divulged that her visits to Wildflower Farms were no longer clandestine, that I had personally ventured there and observed what was necessary. That mere days prior, I had been in Manhattan and engaged briefly with Gerald Whitmore. Upon hearing this, Claire stiffened. I elaborated that Hale had acted exactly as one in his position would he prioritized his marriage, his firm, and his father-in-law. Slowly, she resumed her seat. She gazed at a specific spot within the room for an extended duration without uttering a word. I found myself devoid of any further words, thus I retreated into another chamber, leaving her solitary with the scenario. Subsequently, after 2 days had elapsed, I found myself in the kitchen with Claire when her phone rang. She responded and fell silent. From my vantage point, I distinctly heard the crisp, terse voice of a corporate representative on the line. The individual spoke swiftly and bluntly, enunciating facts. That very morning, Claire's access to all corporate systems was entirely rescinded. She was instructed to return her work laptop and relinquish her building pass by the day's end. The corporation intended to dismiss her with cause, referencing a severe and flagrant breach of her employment contract. No severance agreement or recommendations were offered. This brief dialogue spanned barely 2 minutes. Claire remained quiet during this revelation and terminated the call. An oppressive silence settled over the kitchen. For a fleeting instant, neither of us stirred. For an extended period, Claire stared at her phone, then fixed her gaze on me. No tears, no remorse, only icy resentment reflected in her eyes. I remained silent, for there was nothing left to elaborate upon. Claire spun around briskly, exited the kitchen, and vanished upstairs. The phone remained abandoned on the counter. 2 days later, I entered the kitchen in the morning to find Claire seated at the table with a coffee cup. I placed a folder before her containing divorce documents with typical terms regarding property division. She opened the folder and scanned the first page. Then she looked up at me. I informed her that the marriage had ended. Protracting it served no purpose for either of us. The house was mine even before our union, and it would remain so. Her car and her accounts were hers. She perused the documents without utterance. I stayed by the window, giving her space. She didn't object. She picked up a pen and signed each page where indicated. I grabbed the folder, shut it, and immediately headed to my lawyer. The documentation was completed inside a week. By the next Friday, Claire had vacated the premises. I chose not to inquire about her destination. A month onwards, a shared associate disclosed she'd accepted a job at a lesser-known firm in New Jersey. No news of Everett Hale surfaced thereafter. However, a couple of months down the line, I stumbled upon a fleeting mention in a legal journal's update. She had resigned from the firm, attributing her decision to personal circumstances. No additional information was provided. On the following Monday, I resumed managing my business. The clients remained, the work piled up, and life continued as it does when one ceases waiting for things to become clear and instead moves forward. What are your thoughts on this narrative? If you were informed of her assistant's words, what would be your reaction? Would you patiently await her return from her trip like the protagonist did? Or would you head straight to the resort as suggested? Please share your opinions in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for even more fascinating tales coming up.